Hello, and welcome to Love Life with Dr. Babe. We're going to switch things up a bit today. After 7 episodes and a ton of feedback and curiosity from the audience, we've decided that Dr. Babe needs to tell her story. So on today's show, our guest is actually going to turn the tables on me and do the interviewing. Have you been wondering where I got this name Dr. Babe from? What the purpose is of the show and why I pick the topics that I do? Today, Mrs. Anne-Marie Diaz is going to investigate what she thinks may be of interest to you, the audience. Anne-Marie is an art therapist at the Wellness Center, and she's also a filmmaker with her husband and is very involved in the arts and film in general. I'm happy to welcome her on the show for today's episode on the Dr. Babe story.
All right.
So welcome, Anne-Marie.
Thank you.
I'm kind of handing the reins over to you and abdicating control, so feel free to go where you want to, but I tried to keep it, short and brief, the preface of the show, so that you can kind of make it your own, and I'm on the hot seat and the one vulnerable today.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll try to not take it too hard on you. But yeah, I'll just go ahead and dive right in.
Sure.
How about we start off by you kind of just telling us the story behind Dr. Babe. How did you come up with that name?
Well, it's hard to know where to kind of start with this story because I guess there's the long story and the short story. Have you seen the show? Have you seen some of the episodes yet?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm hoping that you maybe have some questions as well as to being a part of the audience as to what this is about or curiosities that you may have. So bear with me. I guess I'll go a little bit further back into my own personal history.
Okay.
It's kind of difficult to know where to begin. Okay, so the doctor part is obviously the more professional part, right?
Yeah.
Kind of all my life, I feel like I've had this pressure to achieve, to strive for success, and sort of never quit, like just be the best that I could be. It's almost like the sense of perfectionism that was instilled in me from a long time ago.
Okay.
I grew up in Cayman, and as a child, and everyone kind of has this, well, there are a lot of people that have like a big fish in a small pond experience.
Yeah.
And that was definitely something that I experienced, and feeling kind of like there was a microscope on me. I did a lot of, well, I focused on academics. I was like head girl almost every year, except for one. And I did some beauty pageants and stuff like that. And just my mom always, pushed me to do anything I could, and she said I could do whatever I put my mind to. And I think it just sort of built me into this character that felt like I needed to be the best at anything and everything. And I took that to heart when it came to my academics. I did try to do the acting and modeling. That's why I moved to the States, actually. I was 12 years old. And I did that for a while, but then I switched gears and focused on schooling, and I just never stopped. I did my undergrad, my master's, and just went on to my PhD. And that was a big milestone for me. Like, it put a lot of pressure on me, but I was just determined to persevere. And I did. It was a really long process. So it was actually 10 years post-master's that I did a doctorate for. And I think, once that finished, once I graduated and I got the PhD, I got the doctor part down, I started to shift. And I think, at first I didn't really know what was happening, but I realized at some point that I wasn't happy. It was like I achieved everything I ever set my mind to achieve, ticked all the boxes. I got my PhD, I got married, I moved back to Cayman, and I just sort of started coasting, and I got on automatic pilot. And so when I had time to reflect, now that I had time on my hands after finishing school, it was just an emptiness there.
Right.
And actually, funny enough, the thing that sort of catalyzed the change was the movie, The Man, the film.
Yes.
And when I took part in that, it was like, for the first time, I wasn't acting. It was almost like I was myself again. And it just made me realize the contrast of how I was living was just sort of this muted existence where I wasn't really being myself. It's almost like I was projecting this image of, a professional doctor and who I should be according to what people think. And then when I was acting, I just felt sort of spontaneous and effervescent, and I really enjoyed it. And so that kind of was the spark. And then I started doing more meditation and reflection, and I realized that it's almost like, I don't know if you're familiar, we talked about it on the first show, about masculine and feminine energies.
Yeah, I watched that. Yeah.
Yeah, that I really love that concept. But that's kind of what happened to me, and I think that's what Tom was referring to some of the times, because he saw my evolution through this process. And I was so masculine for a long time. Like, I'm a Leo. I'm just very determined, and I like to be in control and dominate and be competitive, all that kind of stuff. And when I realized I wasn't happy and that I was left unfulfilled and was almost like cut off from my soul, my humanity, I explored the concept of femininity and the divine feminine energies and stuff like that through yoga and meditation, and I embraced it. And that is the babe part.
Okay.
If you see where I'm going.
I do.
So that's what happened, is I started just really focusing on igniting that feminine energy and being comfortable in my body and being comfortable being unpredictable and fallible and soulful and earthy. And it felt so good. It felt good to be home. That's what it felt like, just myself, more holistic. So it wasn't just one side of me, it was both sides of me. I was all of me. And so then the actual specific concept of Dr. Babe, one, it was, I finally have doctor in front of my name. And two, it was just, what would be a good concept, a good brand to help send the message across to an audience. And we'll probably get to that more, but just to finish this answer for you, I know I'm being long-winded.
Yeah, it's really interesting, yeah.
So yeah, the babe is just really being confident. It's not being ashamed of your femininity and your womanhood. It's embracing your sexuality. And sexuality is a big part of what I do for a living, because I work with sexual abuse victims and I work with couples. And so I do want to be a sex therapist. You have to get a certification for that, specifically eventually down the road, but I need a break from school. But yeah, so sexuality is a large part of what I did, but it wasn't really something that I embraced personally. And so now that I feel more whole, I feel like that's such an important part of our relationships and our relationship to ourselves, that I wanted to bring that to the forefront. Because a lot of people, especially in Cayman, it's a taboo subject. You shouldn't be talking about it. You shouldn't even be showing it, right? Yeah. And so I think that's a large part of why we have a lot of the negative connotations and actually just the sexual abuse, the exploitation and maltreatment of women and children is because of that, because we're so hush-hush about healthy sex, that this sort of deviant sexuality takes place. So it's me challenging that. It's me bringing it to the forefront and me saying there's nothing wrong with embracing your womanhood and embracing your sexuality, your sensuality, and all that sort of stuff. And I mean, in another sense, you could call it goddess, right? I mean, it's the same concept. It's just Dr. Babe is much catchier, I think. Dr. Goddess just doesn't sound as good.
Okay.
So I think some people probably have a reaction to the babe part. I don't know what that is. No one's really come to me specifically with their opinions, but I think well, that's not true. Someone has. So I guess they think it's more of a derogatory term because of their misperceptions or their own sort of assumptions about what that means. So it's me just saying, wait a minute, it's a subjective thing. It's a personal thing. And I'm definitely not saying it in a derogatory way. I'm saying it in an empowering way to say, I'm divinely feminine, and I'm proud of that. And it's okay. And, we all have insecurities and stuff. It's not about thinking that I'm, the prettiest or the best or anything like that, but it's about me embracing it and just being okay with whatever it is, just being me.
Right. I think, when I first heard you calling yourself Dr. Babe, I did think, oh, what's the story behind that? And I initially thought, it's about maybe confidence boosting for not just yourself, but for other people to embrace who they really are. And from hearing that, it sounds like that's a lot of the story.
Definitely.
Right?
I would say so. Does that explanation sort of fill that out? I mean,
it does. Yeah, it really does. Well, geez, what do I ask now? Well, I'd love to ask a bit more about the show and what was why did you want to do Love Life?
Yeah, that's the other part of the story. So basically, I don't know how much we're going to get into this, but most people know that I've been married, and I guess 17 months ago, I was no longer in my marriage, and that process it's a pivotal one.
Yeah.
I did, the last episode was on life after divorce. So it's a little bit personal, but you know, I think the important thing is to realize what a personal journey it is. And, you know, some things are private, but I think that it's important to talk about it, not to shame people again for having life happen. And I certainly take responsibility for, you know, my part of it. But I think ultimately it's a choice that you make based on what makes you happy. And obviously there's other things involved. It's more complicated than that. But then once you make the decision, it's such a big life change. You know, it's a major stress. It's a major, it's hard to adjust to. And so I had to really dig deep. I had to look inside and figure out, what do I want? What do I need? What am I made up of? What kind of life do I want for myself? Now that I'm in this situation, I need to really reinvent myself in a lot of ways, right? Yeah. So that's where that came from. It was just a lot of reflection. I'm a writer. I write constantly. I've had journals going nonstop, multiple journals at a time. And so I reflect on relationships, I reflect on self-development and stuff like that. And these topics come up a lot on my mind. So I kind of started organizing those thoughts, like in my downtime, spending a lot of time with myself. And I spent a lot of time on social media because when you're alone all of a sudden, it's like, oh my gosh, you get really lonely.
Right.
And you have to lean on your friends, like what we were saying in the last show. I mean, that's a big part of it. But also you have to lean on yourself. You have to figure out what you're made up of and what you want out of this life. And, you know, I did a lot of Snapchatting, because it was almost like a forum for me to express myself. So I did these sort of video confessionals.
Oh, I haven't seen those.
No, I keep it, you know, very selective, very private. We know each other from work.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely had boundaries around that, but there were people that I felt comfortable expressing myself with.
Yeah.
And you know what? I started getting a lot of feedback from people on Facebook, on Snapchat, just in general. People would come up to me, pull me aside, and sort of whisper in my ear, oh, I love what you're doing, like it's just really empowering me. I feel inspired to be more comfortable with myself and expressing myself, be honest. You know, it's not always about showing the best of life, but it's about being real. And so when people were really responding to it, I think that's when my wheels started spinning in my mind. I'm always sort of open to these ideas that inspire me and get me really like passionate, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's usually a two-part process, like a parallel process of what work I do personally, and then how I can translate that to be of service for other people.
Right, okay.
So that's what happened. And the Dr. Babe came about. I don't remember if someone said that to me or if I kind of said it to test it out. And it stuck and people started saying it. And I'm like, oh, this is great. You know, it's working. And because I tried a few different taglines and names and hashtags and stuff like that. And then finally, when it sort of solidified itself, I remember April, our producer from K-Man 27, and she and I had talked a few times about maybe doing something one day. And I was always like, oh, you know, I'm busy, I can't do it, I can't make time. But I definitely wanted this element in my life, hopefully predominantly, but right now it's a passion project, and that's good because it's making me really happy. But yeah, and there were other people too that approached me, but this time I just, her and I have this connection, and I felt really, I don't know, like aligned with her message and her personality, and I messaged her on Facebook. I think it was August, it wasn't really that long ago, and I said, April, I'm ready, let's do a show. Wow. She said, sure, come, let's have coffee, pitch me the idea, you have a concept? Yep. And we met, and she's like, I'm in, let's do it.
Wow, yeah.
And we just ran with it.
That's awesome. Yeah, and congratulations. I really enjoy watching it, to be honest.
Thank you.
It's really awesome. So what kind of feedback have you been getting since you started the show?
I've gotten a lot of great feedback from people. I mean, I think they're just sort of curious and interested. I don't know if a lot of people are watching it on a weekly basis. The new shows come out on Friday nights, and I have some people that they emailed me or messaged me last week, and they're like, what's on tonight? What's on tonight? But you know, we ran the last show. So I know people are watching, and people are looking out online because we've gotten a lot of hits on the views on videos and stuff like that, and YouTube. And I think it's just, I guess what people are specifically saying to me are maybe the more positive things, but I kind of hear behind the scenes, you know, from the grapevine, that there are some criticisms or maybe more, I don't know, opinions based on negative ideas or assumptions. I think some people are just wondering about how open I'm being, or
Right.
how if that's really appropriate, or some people are just uncomfortable with that. But you said you watched the first episode, right?
Yeah,
With Tom?
yeah.
So Tom said something that I keep referencing because it just really captures this process so beautifully. I mean, he said in a different context, but he was making the point that you can't focus on warming up the cold spots. If you focus on warming up the cold spots, they just sort of dig in and bring down the warmth, right, to a cooler temperature. But if you focus on heating up the warm spots, and they become ablaze and fiery, then not only do they get hotter, right, but the cold spots actually come up and meet them in the middle, right, and maybe get hot too, who knows. So I'm really not trying to change the minds of people who are convinced that talking about these things are inappropriate,
Right.
or they feel that, I don't know, just against the name or whatever it is. I'm really not about changing their minds. I'm focusing on the people that are kind of where I was maybe 2 years ago, where it's like something's just not clicking for me in my life. I'm missing something. I'm projecting this what I should do, what I ought to do, and striving and checking off boxes, but it's like you're an automatic pilot or having this inertia experience in life, but you're not really living it. You're not really engaged and connected. And those people, I think, are really responding well to it. It's like, this feels different. This feels transparent and real and vulnerable. And I get it. I get that that's what I'm missing in my life. I'm just sort of going through the motions and not really experiencing life. Or it's like, right now I feel like I'm designing my life. I'm in control, but not like in the masculine Leo way, but more like I don't feel like life is just happening to me. I feel like I am participating in this process and making it my own, and taking the bad with the good, and so forth. So those are the people that I'm targeting, and those are the people that are really responding so well. And it really does make me feel worthwhile that this is of service to people. It's definitely not just something that, I mean, it's obviously something I enjoy. It's my passion, but it's not about just being in the public eye. That's not what it's about to me. It's actually the opposite. Because when I was in the public eye as a child, I was very unhappy. And it caused a lot of negative things in my life. So that's definitely not what I'm seeking by doing this now. But I hope that it's entertaining, and I hope that people are having fun with it and maybe thinking about other things that they can do too.
Right. Well, that's really interesting. I guess I want to get your opinion on, so those people that you say that you're not really maybe targeting, or maybe even those that you are targeting, do you think maybe they maybe look at you as the mental health professional, as someone that represents safety and privacy and confidentiality, and now it's quite juxtaposed, or maybe they're a bit scared of this juxtaposed position where you're actually in the public eye and you're talking about really important issues. Right. What's your opinion on that?
I think that's a good point to bring up. I appreciate you asking that. And I know there's definitely going to be people that are going to be uncomfortable coming to me, and I recognize that. But yes, I'm more targeting the other people because I also professionally would like to create that niche for myself. When you do what you love, it's not really work. I love my job, but there are certain things that I don't feel comfortable doing.
Right.
There are certain people that are just never a good fit for certain therapists, and vice versa.
Right, yeah.
And so, I really want to target the people who are probably being left out by more traditional and conservative therapists, because then they go and they feel like, well, maybe I'm being judged, or maybe they see them out and they're so different from them that they don't feel comfortable even going to therapy or seeking that process. So I really want to speak to those people and say, come talk to me, because I mean, no therapist should be judging, and I'm sure that they're not, but I think it's when you feel, I guess accepted, like, it's okay, I can talk about my non-traditional relationship. I don't have to be in a heterosexual, monogamous, or whatever relationship, or I don't have to be religious. I can just be myself. And I know this person is going to be real with me too. And I can kind of get to know her and be familiar with her. So it's almost like, oh, I like her vibe. You know, I feel comfortable with that. I want to meet her. I want to talk to her.
Okay.
And that has actually been happening. I've had some people actually reach out on Facebook and say, you know what, I was watching you and you just seemed like so happy and so vibrant. And I was like, I want to know this person. I want to talk to her. And so that I think is a helpful tool to bring people in. But I certainly do think that there is a whole population of people that aren't seeking help because they don't feel that they will be accepted.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. So you see the two almost juxtaposed positions actually coming together, and going back to your discussion with Tom, right? It's very much related. Okay, so that's really cool. So I wonder, so going back to your marriage, like you say, do you think since you have become divorced, do you think, you know, people call into question your credibility as a counselor?
I mean, I know people probably do. I don't think anyone said anything to my face yet, but I encourage everyone to come and talk to me face to face. I'm happy with you know, frank conversations. Usually not if it's like really social hour, you know.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
you know, in an appropriate context, yeah, feel free. But okay, I thought about this when it got brought to my attention. I don't know about you. You're an art therapist, but do you feel like a therapist needs to go through an experience in order to be good at being a therapist for a person who's experiencing that?
No, absolutely not.
So
I think we can empathize more, but no. Yeah.
And that's kind of what I was taught, that you know, early on and throughout my training and with colleagues and stuff. You know, you go through a lot of supervision when you're in the helping professions, and that's definitely always been sort of drilled in me, is like, don't feel guilty. Don't feel guilty because you haven't been depressed, or don't feel guilty because you haven't, you know, been an alcoholic or a cocaine addict, or you haven't had this problem or that problem.
Right.
It doesn't make you unrelatable. It doesn't mean that you won't have empathy for the person. And we go through a lot of training in order to be able to have that empathy and be able to solve problems without necessarily experiencing them ourselves. Right. Now, okay, relating to the question, it's the way that I approach being a therapist. It's about really letting the client lead and not necessarily giving them advice, right? I think most of us are like that, but trying to shine a light of self-reflection with the client so that they can discover what they need in order to be happy. And ultimately, I think that's what my job is to help people become happy and sustain happiness and be healthy in every which way that I have influence over, but have that overall holistic experience of fulfillment in their lives. And honestly, I think I was not as good of a therapist before because I wasn't there. I didn't have that sort of full-on self-actualization yet. I mean, obviously it's not a destination you reach, but I'm further now than I was then, let's just say. Right. And being in that headspace before, I was still projecting sort of that image of what you should be like. I mean, I can admit it now. I was probably too afraid to before, but I think there was a pressure on me knowing that I have a PhD in marriage and family therapy. I have to be married.
Yeah.
It was there. I think that's a real honest reflection, and it was probably part of the problem, you know, is that I felt like I had to be, and
that pressure.
Yeah. And you know, if I had never gotten married, would people be saying the same thing? How can you relate to relationships and marriage if you're not married, or if you don't have kids? I don't have kids either, right? That question comes up a lot too. So yes, I understand that people do question that, but it's usually, in clinical terms, you know, it's more like a power play. You know, it's that resistance that you get from a client, which is part of the process of trust building. So when they really connect with you, it doesn't matter anymore what your background is. If they feel that authenticity, that's something that's real, that happens. It's different about a therapeutic relationship. And I think now that I've had sort of not all experiences, but I've had both sides of it. I've been married. I know personally firsthand what it takes, what doesn't work, and how to discover if you're really happy or not. It actually gives me a more fuller experience to relate to the people who want to be in a marriage and to relate to the people who don't want to be in a marriage. And ultimately, when I'm seeing a married couple or a cohabitating couple, someone in a long-term relationship, I mean, people have a misconception about marriage therapy, marital therapy. It's not about doing whatever it takes to make it work. That's just not real.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes in pastoral counseling, the push is obviously to stay married,
Right.
because there's a judgment about divorce and stuff like that.
Right.
Not always, but I think predominantly. But in marriage therapy, it's about figuring out what's best for the relationship. And sometimes what's best for the relationship is for it to end, because that's what makes both persons happy, and they just are at a stalemate and they're not willing or able to compromise or do what it takes in order to make the relationship work. So I think sometimes even that myth about marriage therapy is sort of corrupting people's opinions about what it takes to be a good therapist as
Right,
well.
right.
So there's a lot of elements involved, but I mean, I can understand the knee-jerk response to say, well, why am I going to listen to you if you're not successfully in a relationship? But why would you go to a therapist who's not happy?
Yeah.
If we took some kind of assessment of therapists and professionals, I mean, I'd be interested to see where along the scale are they in happiness and life fulfillment and personal development, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's lower than we would hope.
Right.
And I think that's what's the most important thing. I want to go see someone who's alive and happy and authentic and really engaged
Yeah.
in life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that
That does.
Okay,
That does
answers your
answer the question. Sure does. So yeah, let's go back to the show. So what do you envision? How do you see this show maybe evolving?
Well, one thing I know, first and foremost, right now it's been a passion project for a while, but we need to find some sponsors and investors in it to keep it going. So
Yes.
that's important in order for
Okay.
that vision to keep going.
Very true.
But I think this is the 8th episode, so we probably have maybe 3 more episodes this season.
Okay.
Take a break for the holidays and then come back and probably have another 11 or 12 episodes for season 2. So over the holidays, I will be busy writing away and reflecting and meditating on some other ideas and different offshoots of maybe things that we've talked about this season that we didn't get to focus on or highlight. And figuring out the guests, that's a really hard part.
Yeah.
Because I don't just say anyone come on. It really has to align with the topic. It has to be something that the person has experienced or has insight on and can speak to authentically.
Right.
However, I do want to say the little caveat is I think it would be good to have some, kind of like today a little bit, like we're confronting some issues that, are different than the rest of the topics. But maybe we could challenge a little bit, like someone who may be not as warm spot, but cold spot,
Right, I
and
know.
have that, like, not confrontation in an aggressive way, but
No.
kind of have that exploration and debate or whatever about some issues. So I do have some ideas.
Okay.
But it's always about thinking about things differently, reframing topics, not just regurgitating the way things have been talked about before. So I don't want to waste people's time and just talk about something benign.
Right. Yeah, because that's what makes for good TV, right? Is there's a little bit of conflict in there, right?
Yes.
So in terms of the topics that you come up for the show, how do you come up with that? You were saying reflection. Is there anything else that contributes?
Experience. I mean, I do that kind of across things that I have going on in my life. I sort of parallel them in one way or the other. And just speaking about how this came up, I was thinking about who would be a really good partner in this episode. And I thought of you and all your skills in film and everything. And professionally, we've worked together specifically in there was one retreat that we did together.
Yeah.
And so, I thought it was a good blend because you bring credibility to this as a colleague professionally.
Thank you.
But also just in your personality. I think that you have really exemplified bringing forth your passion and being happy in different ways in your life. So I do really appreciate you coming on the show today and being a part of this and putting me in the hot spot. And I'm sure that the audience has enjoyed you and that this has been hopefully helpful for them too, to get a little bit of an insight into me. So I do appreciate it.